Most people believe hatred is earned. They imagine you must betray someone, embarrass them, compete with them, take something they value. Only then would they have a reason to dislike you. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers human nature doesn't always work that way. Sometimes people secretly resent you long before you've ever harmed them, not because of what you did, because of what your presence quietly awakens inside them. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, a hidden self filled with desires, insecurities, envy, and truths too uncomfortable to admit. Most people never meet that shadow consciously. They spend their lives protecting themselves from seeing it. Then someone quietly enters their world without trying to impress anyone, without competing, without pretending. The Sophia Empath rarely forces people to reveal themselves. They simply create a space where masks become difficult to maintain. That is why their presence feels strangely unsettling. There was a time when the Sophia Empath believed that authenticity naturally attracted authenticity. If they were honest, others would value honesty. If they offered kindness, kindness would return. If they chose understanding, they would be understood. Reality answered differently. Slowly, they began noticing a disturbing pattern. The more genuine they became, the more uncomfortable certain people became. The more peaceful they felt, the more irritated others seemed. The less they needed approval, the more they were quietly judged. Different faces, the same invisible reaction. People don't always hate those who hurt them. Sometimes they hate those whose existence quietly exposes what they have spent years hiding from themselves. Carl Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious doesn't disappear. It searches for someone onto whom it can be projected. The Sophia Empath slowly realizes some criticism was never really criticism. Some rejection was never really rejection. Some hatred had very little to do with them at all. It was another person's shadow, looking for somewhere else to live. That realization changes everything, because the Sophia Empath stops asking, why do they secretly dislike me? Instead, they begin asking, what part of themselves becomes uncomfortable every time they stand beside me? Perhaps that is the quiet truth few people ever accept. The deepest hatred is rarely born from what you have done. It is often born from what your presence refuses to let another person keep hiding. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers that secret hatred rarely announces itself openly. It arrives quietly, a compliment that somehow feels like criticism, a smile that disappears the moment you succeed, support that slowly turns into distance. Nothing obvious, yet something always feels different. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious cannot hide forever. It leaks through behavior, not once, repeatedly. The Sophia Empath begins paying attention, not to dramatic betrayals, but to tiny patterns most people never notice. The friend who celebrates everyone else's success, except yours. The colleague who encourages your dreams until they begin coming true. The family member who only questions your decisions when you're finally becoming confident. Different relationships, the same unconscious discomfort. People often believe jealousy always looks aggressive. It doesn't. Sometimes, jealousy wears the mask of concern. I'm just worried about you. Don't get your hopes up. Be realistic. The words sound caring, but the energy quietly asks for one thing: stay where you are, because your growth forces someone else to confront their own stagnation. People don't resent your weakness. They resent the possibility that you might outgrow the role they assigned to you. The Sophia Empath slowly realizes that some people only felt comfortable when they were constantly explaining themselves, apologizing, seeking approval, questioning their own intuition. The moment that stopped, the relationship changed. Not because the Sophia Empath became arrogant, because they became difficult to emotionally control. Carl Jung believed that projection becomes strongest when another person's authenticity threatens the identity we've carefully built around ourselves. That is why manipulative people often accuse honest people of manipulation. That is why dishonest people become suspicious of sincere intentions. And that is why insecure people sometimes call confidence arrogance. People don't always describe you. Sometimes they unknowingly describe their own unconscious world. The Sophia Empath finally understands that hidden hatred often begins where silent comparison replaces genuine connection. Not everyone wants to become more conscious. Some people simply want the reminder to disappear. And perhaps that is why the people who secretly resent you rarely fear your words. They fear what your quiet authenticity makes impossible to ignore inside themselves. The Sophia Empath eventually realizes that the people who secretly resent you are often the same people who once admired you. At first, your calmness inspired them, your patience comforted them, your willingness to understand made them feel safe. But admiration can quietly become resentment the moment your growth reminds someone of everything they refuse to become. Carl Jung believed that the shadow doesn't hate light because light is cruel. It hates light because light reveals what darkness worked so hard to hide. The Sophia Empath never intended to become anyone's mirror, yet somehow their presence quietly reflects what other people avoid seeing. Integrity reflects dishonesty. Peace reflects inner chaos. Self-respect reflects self-neglect. Different qualities, the same uncomfortable reflection. People don't always hate your success. Sometimes they hate how peaceful you remain without needing the things they spent their entire lives chasing. The Sophia Empath begins noticing that some people loved the version of them that constantly sacrificed themselves, the version that never said no, the version that apologized first, the version that carried everyone's emotional weight without asking for anything in return. Then something changed, not their kindness, their boundaries, and suddenly the same people who once called them caring began calling them selfish. Kindness without boundaries quietly teaches people how to use you. Carl Jung believed that every unconscious relationship depends upon familiar roles: the rescuer, the victim, the controller, the pleaser. The Sophia Empath quietly stepped out of the role others had assigned them. That single decision made some relationships feel completely unfamiliar, because people rarely resist who you are becoming. They resist losing the version of you that benefited them. The Sophia Empath finally understands that hidden hatred is often nothing more than disappointed expectation. They expected you to remain uncertain, to remain available, to remain emotionally dependent on their approval. When those expectations disappeared, so did their comfort. Perhaps that is why Carl Jung believed that becoming conscious always changes relationships, because awareness doesn't merely change how you see other people. It changes how other people can no longer see you as someone they can quietly control. The Sophia Empath eventually discovers that the deepest form of hidden hatred isn't expressed through anger. It's expressed through quiet resistance. No direct attacks, no open arguments, only subtle attempts to make you question yourself. Carl Jung believed that whatever threatens the ego is rarely welcomed. It is resisted because the ego doesn't defend truth, it defends identity. The Sophia Empath slowly notices that certain people become strangely uncomfortable. The moment they stop seeking approval, nothing dramatic changes. They simply stop explaining themselves. They stop chasing people who have already decided to misunderstand them. They stop apologizing for boundaries that should never have required an apology, and somehow that quiet change creates loud reactions. People often believe they are hated because they became stronger. Sometimes they are hated because they became harder to influence. Manipulative people don't fear intelligence, they prepare for intelligence. They fear awareness because awareness quietly destroys every strategy built upon confusion. The Sophia Empath begins remembering how many conversations were never really conversations. They were negotiations. Negotiations for attention, for guilt, for emotional control. The moment those negotiations ended, the relationship began falling apart. Different people. The same hidden pattern. People don't always become distant because you hurt them. Sometimes they become distant because they no longer recognize the version of you they once controlled. Carl Jung believed that the shadow fights hardest when it realizes it is about to be exposed. That is why people sometimes become unexpectedly defensive without being accused, unexpectedly hostile without being attacked, unexpectedly cold without any obvious reason, because your awareness quietly removed the hiding place their unconscious depended on. The Sophia Empath finally understands that secret hatred was often disguised as indifference, as sarcasm, as unnecessary criticism, as support that quietly disappears. The moment your life begins improving, people don't resent your peace. They resent what your peace forces them to question about their own chaos. Perhaps that is why the Sophia Empath no longer feels the need to convince everyone of their good intentions. Because people who genuinely seek truth rarely need endless explanations. Only those protecting an illusion demand that you keep defending the reality they have already chosen not to see. The Sophia Empath eventually realizes that the people who secretly hate you rarely want to destroy you. They want something quieter. They want to shrink you, not openly, silently. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious protects itself through comparison. When another person's presence quietly challenges the story we tell ourselves, the mind searches for a way to restore comfort. Sometimes that comfort comes through criticism, sometimes through gossip, sometimes through pretending that you were never that important to begin with. Different behaviors, the same unconscious defense. The Sophia Empath begins noticing that some people don't compete through achievement. They compete through perception. If they cannot become what you have become, they will quietly try to change how others see you. The calm person becomes cold. The confident person becomes arrogant. The private person becomes secretive. The emotionally aware person becomes too sensitive. Different labels, the same hidden purpose. If reality cannot be changed, the story about reality often can. People don't always attack your character because they understand it. Sometimes they attack it because they never could. Carl Jung believed that projection is rarely intentional. Most people honestly believe the stories their unconscious creates. That is why arguing with projection almost never works. You cannot reason with a wound that refuses to admit it exists. The Sophia Empath slowly stops trying to correct every false narrative, not because the truth no longer matters, because truth doesn't become stronger through endless defense. It becomes stronger through consistency. People who truly know you watch your behavior. People who secretly resent you collect isolated moments that support the story they already decided to believe. People don't always need evidence to dislike someone. Sometimes they only need an emotion they cannot explain, and then the mind quietly creates a reason. The Sophia Empath finally understands that hidden hatred often says more about another person's unfinished inner conflict than it ever says about the one receiving it. Perhaps that is why Carl Jung believed that becoming conscious is such a lonely path, because once you begin seeing projection, comparison, and unconscious resentment for what they truly are, you stop asking, how do I make everyone understand me? And begin asking, why was I ever asking people who refused to understand themselves to understand me first? The Sophia Empath eventually understands that the greatest mistake was never believing that everyone was good. It was believing that everyone wanted to become better. Carl Jung believed that every human being is offered the opportunity to become conscious, but not everyone accepts it, because awareness demands responsibility, and responsibility is heavier than illusion. The Sophia Empath once believed that enough patience could inspire transformation, that enough love could awaken honesty, that enough understanding could soften manipulation. Reality quietly answered with a different lesson. People change when discomfort becomes greater than denial, not when someone loves them enough. Different people, the same psychological law. The Sophia Empath begins noticing that the people who secretly resented them were often offered the same kindness, the same understanding, the same forgiveness, yet they chose comparison instead of gratitude, projection instead of reflection, control instead of growth. People often believe hatred comes from pain. Sometimes it comes from choice, the choice to protect the ego instead of confronting it. Carl Jung believed that the shadow grows stronger every time it is defended. The Sophia Empath finally understands why some people could never truly celebrate them, because celebrating your growth would require admitting their own excuses were never the real obstacle. People don't always reject who you are. Sometimes they reject what your existence proves is possible. Someone who heals reminds others that healing was available. Someone who grows reminds others that growth required effort. Someone who chooses peace reminds others that chaos was never their only option. That reminder is unbearable to a mind committed to avoiding itself. The Sophia Empath no longer feels angry, only clear, because clarity reveals something hatred never could. Not everyone is meant to understand you. Not everyone is willing to understand themselves. And perhaps that is the quiet truth hidden beneath every relationship. You were never secretly hated because you were different. You were secretly hated because your authenticity became a mirror, and mirrors never create what they reflect. They simply reveal what was already standing there, waiting to be seen. The Sophia Empath finally stops trying to change what another person sees when they look at them, because they understand the image isn't created by the mirror, it is created by the one standing in front of it. And maybe that is Carl Jung's most unsettling insight of all. The greatest battles between people rarely begin outside. They begin inside the unconscious, long before a single word is ever spoken.